guys, and welcome back to my channel. With all of the swindling going around, the Tinder Swindler and Creating Anna, all of those exciting Netflix documentaries, I did a little digging and it turns out that we have our own remarkable swindler. She is a part of our history. So who was Amy Bock? Was she an eccentric? Was she a con artist? Or was she just mentally unstable? You decide. Amy was born on the 18th of May of 1859 in Tasmania, Australia, where she lived most of her childhood. She was born into a respectable family. Her father owned a successful photography business and everything seemed perfect. But there was a secret, a very dark secret within that family. Amy's mother suffered from the invisible illness, what we now may consider manic depressive disorder or bipolar disorder. When Amy was 10 years old, her mom was sent to a lunatic asylum, and that was the last time that Amy saw her. It could be said that Amy coped with the loss of her mother by making up stories and living in a fantasy world. Her father was always worried that she was falling under the same sickness as her mother. Perhaps due to the frustration or the fact that the father couldn't cope with Amy, he sent her to a boarding school in Melbourne at the age of 17. Amy spent 2 years of her life here. When Amy finished high school and she graduated, it wasn't all rainbows and sunshines. She realized that her father's business was struggling and that they were in financial distress. So what did her father do? He set her up with her first job. He sent her to a rural school to become a teacher. And you guessed it, it is at this point where Amy begins her swindling career. The best thing about Amy is that she knew how to make a good impression. This girl was polite, she was charming, she was kind, and she was well educated. She was perfection. People loved her so much that she gained people's trust extremely quickly, and everyone fell for her tricks. On 2 occasions, inspectors found that Amy was falsifying school documents. She was inflating the number of students going to her class. The larger the class number, the more money she would get paid. In addition to inflating the numbers of the roll, a girl used her hustling skills to use her status as a teacher to borrow money from creditors. Amy was having the time of her life in the rural school. She was getting paid really well to do her job. She was getting money from creditors. She was living it up. But unfortunately, this didn't last long for her because the creditors demanded payment. Amy found herself in a corner because she couldn't repay the money back. It was at that point that Amy got desperate and she started writing letters trying to buy herself time so that she could repay the debt. When the letters didn't work, Amy decided to forge a letter from her sister telling the creditors that Amy had died. She basically tried to fake her death. To escape her creditors, Amy was persuaded by her father to move to New Zealand and live in Auckland with him and his new wife. Reluctantly, Amy accepted. When she arrived, she was having a lot of difficulty. She hated living with her father and the new stepmom. Who is she to tell her what to do? So Amy decided to find herself a job, and she got one as a governess. She was having a good time, but again, she fell into temptation. And what did she do? She defrauded her employer. When she got caught and she got put in front of a judge, what did Amy do? She started to cry and she started to beg for forgiveness. She confessed to everything. She was so upset that the judge let her off the hook. The fact that the judge let her off the hook so easily set Amy's swindling career path. She realized how easy it was to manipulate the system and how easy it was to get away with it. From this point onwards, Amy began to live her life by traveling around the country and swindling people for money. Amy would use all of her good qualities, like her charisma, her manners, her intelligence, her polite nature, to find work anywhere. She would work as a governess, she would work as a teacher, and sometimes she would work as a companion. Her employers simply adored her. They loved her. But the love and the joy wouldn't last long, because behind closed doors, our girl Amy was stealing from her employers. She would take their jewelry, any belonging that could easily be carried, take it to a pawn shop and get a few pounds. It needs to be noted that she actually didn't earn a lot of money from these. She probably just stole for the excitement and the rush. And every time that Amy would get caught, just like the first incident, she would cry, beg God to forgive her, confess all her sins, and plead with the judge. She played the role of a distressed woman so well that every single time she was forgiven and let go. Amy was on fire. She thought she had it all sorted. She was going around, swindling things, getting the money. She thought she had everything figured out. But like the good old saying says, all good things must come to an end. And in 1886, her first court appearance was officially recorded. She was charged for buying goods in credit and not paying it back. She was sentenced to 3 months hard labor in Addington Gaol. After the 3 months, she was released, but this freedom didn't last long. In 1887, she was charged again for similar crimes. She was sentenced to 6 months at the detention center in Caversham in the industrial school. Sorry if I didn't say that right, I'll write it down. At the industrial school, she charmed everyone, everybody loved her, and she earned the superintendent's trust. That is a big deal. He was so impressed with her and her ladylike behavior that he offered her a role as a teacher. But all of this came to a stop because he found out that Amy was planning her escape. How did he find out, you might be asking? Well, it turns out that Amy was forging letters to a fictitious loving aunt. And she told her pretend auntie that she was going to escape. Yep. As smart as she was, this was not a smart idea. Or did she simply want to get caught, to get that rush again? After her release, things pretty much moved the same way for Amy. From 1888 to 1889, she was in and out of prison all the time for the same things: petty theft, obtaining credit under false pretenses. At one point, she was actually sentenced 3 years imprisonment. Amy was finally released in 1907, and she tried her best to live a quiet life in Christchurch. But old habits die hard, and this time, she took it up a notch. In 1908, Amy decided that it was time to move. She moved under a different name. The new name that she was going under was Agnes Valence. She found a job as a housekeeper, and like usual, she went in with her charming personality, her lovely manners, and her ladylike behavior. She quickly earned the trust of the family, and she became a popular member of the household. This time, it was different because they treated her like a part of the family. On that Christmas, they left her in charge of the house, something they would quickly regret. By now, it's not a surprise to any of us what will happen next, but this time, Amy wasn't just taking little jewelry pieces, watches, little knickknacks here and there. This time, she took their furniture. That's right. And this time, she thought she was a little bit clever, and she decided to take out loans. Loans. With the furniture as collateral, but under a different name. This time she used Charlotte Skivington. With this, she thought, I'm not going to get caught. I'm using a different name. But what happened is eventually she did get caught. And in 1909, a warrant for her arrest was released. But by the time the police got there, Amy had disappeared. What they didn't know is that a new person was born. In 1909, Percival Leonard Carroll Wood was born, a gentleman of fine breed, the wealthy son of a sheep farmer who loved to vacation and spend his summertime in the South Otago coast. Percy was Amy's new beginning. When Percy was away on holiday, he needed to distress himself because all of the family business, the affairs and all the stress. He needed a wonderful place to stay in, a respectable inn. He would stay at the Albion boarding establishment. And what a surprise! Percy made friends with everyone. The staff, the guests, the flowers in the garden. He was just the bee's knees. One of the residents actually said that Percy was the essence of everything that is good and that is kind. Now, Percy was an eligible bachelor. He was kind, he was wealthy, he was handsome, so it didn't take long for all of the eligible ladies to keep an eye on him. But Percy had his eye on someone, the landlady's daughter. It didn't take long for them to start courting, and in a few weeks, the couple was engaged. So, how was Amy able to maintain the status of wealth? Because everyone knows everyone in that community. So how was she able to keep these appearances? While Amy was taking out small personal loans, she would also forge letters from lawyers, from accountants, and she would send herself packages from those lawyers and those accountants, making it seem like everything was well. No one suspected a thing. Now Percy and the landlady's daughter, who is called Agnes Ottaway, had the fairy tale wedding. This was the wedding of the season, my friends. Everyone who was anybody was at this wedding. 200 guests came to the ceremony. It was so elaborate that even the local MP attended the wedding. But some suspicions, let's say curiosities, started to come afloat. A few days before the wedding, all of Percy's family wrote to say they couldn't come to the wedding. But things quickly escalated when the family realized that Percy wasn't paying his debts leading up to the wedding. They actually had a meeting with him and they were like, we get it, we understand, but you have 1 week's grace period to pay the debts back. No money, no honeymoon. No money, no honey. After this meeting, some things weren't sitting quite right with some of the family friends, and they decided to investigate. Who was this man? To their shocking surprise, they didn't find the existence of Percy's mother. Of course, bling, 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 alarm bells went ringing, and they reported it to the police. A local detective picked up the case, and he realized all of this sounds familiar. He started picking up the telltale signs of Amy's behavior. And as soon as the family friends showed a photo of Amy, the detective was like, I know who she is. Who she is? Sorry, like what, imagine how shocking that would be. It would be very scandalous. So a warrant for her arrest was released, and 4 days after the wedding, Percy was caught. On the 27th of May, Amy faced the court, and she was charged with false pretenses and forgery. Again, we know what happens. Amy pleaded guilty. She did not deny anything. She accepted what was happening. She kind of begged for forgiveness, the whole nine. Tears, everything. She was probably like, how did I get caught? And it was at this time that the judge was like, nah, you're doing this too much. And she was actually declared a habitual criminal. She was the second woman to be given this declaration. Amy was sentenced to 2 years in prison, not just for the accounts of Percy, but also for the stuff that she did during the Christmas period as Agnes Valence. Not long after Amy's conviction, poor Agnes Ottaway must have been in so much distress. She actually appealed the court for an annulment. It was said that she was pale and worried and stressed. She was like, I didn't have any idea. I didn't know she was not a man. And her father was like, could be worse. So the court actually granted the annulment, and Amy did not fight her on anything. And the marriage was actually annulled on the 17th of June of 1909. The stigma of this event didn't just disappear with Amy's conviction. As you can imagine, this was extremely scandalous, especially at the time. No one really heard of people, changing into a different gender's clothes. That was completely unacceptable, let alone get married to someone else, pretending to be someone else. So the papers and the media went nuts in Australia and in New Zealand. The New Zealand Herald actually just dismissed it as like a romance sort of thing. We're not finished with Amy yet. We think that this is the peak of it. There's still a few things to cover. So stay with me. In 1911, Amy was released on probation. And this is because with the declaration, she was not actually allowed to be released until the government decided that it was the best for the public safety, because she was just a menace. After her probation, she moved to Macau, where she really tried to get her life together, and she became a part of the community. She organized plays, she was in the social clubs, she was really trying to make a difference. She even met a nice man that she wanted to marry. He was a farmer from Awakino, and his name was Charles Christopherson. I think I said that right, I don't know. But the marriage didn't last long because Amy had a lot of debt, and he basically was like, nah, I'm not gonna pay for it, and the marriage dissolved. After her last marriage, Amy actually had 3 more convictions in front of the court for, again, similar charges. The last one was recorded in Auckland on the 28th of October. She was sentenced to 2 years probation on the condition that she lived in the Salvation Army. There are not a lot of records of what happened to Amy in her later life. However, she died 12 years later on the 29th of August of 1943. She died at Bombay and was buried in Pukekohe Cemetery. Amy was not a very successful swindler. To be honest, she got caught every single time, and every single time she pleaded guilty. She tried to outsmart the system, but every time it backfired, and she only got a few pounds here and there. And there's actually records that she would give the money away, and she was actually quite popular in all the communities and with her friends because she was so generous and so giving. Was she a victim of society? Was she trying to defy the stereotypical gender roles? Or was she actually mentally unstable? Did she actually have kleptomania? We won't actually know. But what we do know is that she is a remarkable part of history and a very interesting woman nevertheless. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video of our New Zealand remarkable swindler. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.